Episode 2, Tides of Intrigue. 1. Echoes beneath the waves. A low rumble of thunder announced a new day in Westvale. The storm that had gathered the previous night lingered offshore, sending rolling clouds and sporadic bursts of rain over the town. In the early dawn, the ocean looked like chipped slate under a bruised sky, swells heaving against the breakwater. It was a mood that suited the deepening sense of unease among certain residents, especially those caught up in the recent thefts and rumors of hidden treasure. Detective Rowan Byrne rose early from the narrow bed in Mrs. Sweeney's boarding house. The night before, he'd wrestled with half-formed theories and swirling questions, but sleep finally overcame him. Now he dressed quickly, pocketing the battered partial journal that Mr. Finch had entrusted to him. He paused at the window, gazing at the milky haze drifting across the street. The wind rattled the panes as if urging him to hurry. Something told him the answers were close, but if he and Cassia didn't move quickly, whoever was behind the thefts would seize every last clue. Downstairs, he found Mrs. Sweeney already in the kitchen, stirring oatmeal on the stove. She served him a steaming bowl without a word, though her eyes glimmered with curiosity. The news of last night's break-in attempt at Finch's shop had spread like wildfire, and no doubt the landlady wanted details. But Byrne, who valued discretion, simply thanked her for the meal and ate quietly. Midway through breakfast, Mrs. Sweeney finally spoke. "Folk in town say you frightened off a burglar last night," she ventured, ladling herself some tea. "Is it true?" Byrne met her gaze. "I was in the area and saw someone snooping around Mr. Finch's shop. They got away." She pursed her lips, nodding thoughtfully. "This place has always had its oddities, but I can't recall a spree of thefts like we've had these past weeks. It's enough to put everyone on edge." Her voice lowered. "Some say it's a curse, some old ghost stirring up trouble." Byrne recognized the superstitious flavor of small-town lore, but remained non-committal, offering only a wry smile. "I'll keep my eyes open." He finished his meal, thanked her, and grabbed his coat. Outside, fat droplets spattered the street, the fog swirling in damp currents. He pulled the collar up around his neck, wondering if Cassia Morell had made progress deciphering the archaic runes. If luck was on their side, maybe they'd get a lead, something to connect the puzzle pieces of Hawksmoor's legend. 2. A scholar in the library. Cassia Morell had spent the better part of the night hunched over her motel room desk, turning page after page of archaic references she'd painstakingly copied from the library's archives. She'd barely slept. Now, at first light, she found herself once again at the Westvale Public Library. The building's austere stone facade greeted her like an old friend, and she darted inside to escape the rain. Eliza Marlowe, the willowy librarian, was already at her post, cataloguing a stack of new arrivals. She looked up with mild surprise as Cassia approached. "My goodness," she said with a smile. "You're as early a bird as I am." Cassia set her bundle of notes on the desk. "Eliza, I'm sorry to barge in right away, but I desperately need your help analyzing something." She withdrew the partial journal of Cora Hawksmoor, or so they believed, and the scrap of parchment that Detective Byrne had shown her the previous night. "We think these documents contain references to Captain Hawksmoor's final voyage, but the text is partly in some strange script, could be runes or an archaic cipher." Eliza's keen eyes shone with curiosity. "Let's have a look in the archives room." They stepped into the secured space at the rear of the library, the same glass-walled area Cassia had used before. Eliza gently spread the parchment scrap and the journal pages out under a reading lamp. Rain spattered against the high windows overhead, punctuating the hush with occasional drips. Eliza produced a magnifying glass, leaning close. "The letters are partially Latin, but some appear to be runic. It's not purely Old Norse, though. See here, this character looks more like an alchemical symbol. And this one, it could be from a medieval cipher system." Cassia's pulse quickened. "So it's a blend of systems?" That suggests someone deliberately obscured the message? Eliza nodded. I studied cryptography a bit during my graduate work, only the basics, mind you. But I can try matching these with known alphabets or ciphers. She moved to a file cabinet in the corner and pulled out a thick reference manual. Let's see if we can at least identify which runic family these symbols come from. While Eliza flipped pages, Cassia paced. She couldn't shake the sense that time was running short. Some unknown adversary was systematically collecting relics. They already had the brass ship's bell, Mr. Finch's key, and who knew what else. If those objects pointed the way to Hawksmoor's lost cargo, the real treasure or secret might be snatched before Cassia and Bayern could learn the truth. Moments later, Eliza let out a small, triumphant gasp. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a chart. "This symbol here," she tapped the parchment, "is a modified version of the letter F from the Elder Futhark runes, but inverted, combined with this alchemical sign that typically denotes mercury or quicksilver. And if you overlay them, you might get a coded letter that means key or entry. It's guesswork, but it's a start." Cassia leaned in. "What about the stylized C? We keep seeing it. The same crest on the stolen bell, maybe the same letter on the stolen locket." Eliza's brow furrowed. "It could stand for Cora Hawksmoor, as you theorized. Or it might be part of an older coat of arms. I'll keep digging. Let me try comparing these shapes more systematically." Cassia exhaled. "Thank you. I'll leave these references in your capable hands. In the meantime, I need to speak to Detective Bayern. See if he's learned anything new." Eliza smiled warmly. "I'll call you the minute I find something meaningful. Good luck." Clutching her coat, Cassia returned to the main lobby. She had a strange feeling she was being watched, though the library was otherwise empty at this early hour. She glanced over her shoulder, nothing but rows of shelves and the faint flicker of overhead lights. With a small shiver, she stepped outside to brave the drizzle, determined to find Rowan Bayern and share Eliza's early cipher revelations. 3. Whispers on the police scanner. Meanwhile, Bayern stood in the Westvale Police Department's cramped front office, waiting for a word with Officer Hannah Gonzalez, the lead on the recent theft cases. The station was small, a single hallway with 3 offices and a holding cell. A flickering fluorescent bulb illuminated the stark walls. Officer Gonzalez, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s, emerged from an office. "Morning, Detective," she greeted with forced cheer. "Your messages said you wanted to discuss last night's attempted break-in again?" Bayern nodded. "Yes. Any luck on identifying the intruder? Any prints or witnesses?" She crossed her arms, her expression resigned. "No usable prints, no workable CCTV footage. We did get a description from a neighbor, though it's vague. Short figure, hooded jacket. Could be male or female. They disappeared into the fog behind Finch's shop." Bayern sighed. That matched his own recollection. The intruder had been agile and quick, but he couldn't rule out a short adult or even a teenager. "What about the items stolen around town? Any new pattern emerging?" Gonzalez pursed her lips. "I've started a timeline of each theft. The earliest was the black gull feather from the library door, which makes no sense. Then that brass ship's bell from the museum. Then a cameo brooch rumored to be from the 18th century, stolen from an estate sale. Then the antique key from Finch's shop, and so on." "Random on the surface," Byrne mused, "but all seemingly connected to Westvale's maritime past." "Exactly," Gonzalez agreed. "We found faint traces at a couple of scenes, small scraps of that old parchment with weird symbols. It's definitely the same person or group." The phone on Gonzalez's desk buzzed. She stepped over to pick it up, nodded, then motioned for Bayern to follow. "A fisherman just radioed in something unusual off the coast. Let's see if it's relevant." They moved to a side room where a police scanner crackled. On the line, a local fisherman named Grayling was calling in about wreckage or debris that had washed ashore on the rocky southern beach. He claimed it looked old, like something from a sunken ship. Burns' attention spiked. He exchanged a look with Gonzales, who was already grabbing her jacket. "Mind if I tag along?" he asked. She shrugged. "Sure, why not? Let's go see if this is another piece of the puzzle." 4. The Rocks at Storm's Edge. Cassia emerged from the library just in time to see Detective Byrne and Officer Gonzales climbing into a police SUV in a hurry. She waved, managing to catch Byrne's eye. He rolled down the window. "Cassia," he called. "We're headed to the southern beach. A fisherman found something unusual. Want to come?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes, absolutely." She hurried over, sliding into the back seat of the SUV. Officer Gonzales offered a quick greeting, then sped off through town. Rain still drifted in fits and starts, and the sky wore a grim complexion. The drive took them beyond Westvale's main harbour to a lesser-known stretch of coastline where ragged basalt rocks jutted from churning waves. Few people ventured here due to the treacherous surf and slippery footing. They arrived to find a grizzled fisherman standing by his pickup truck near the cliff's edge. The man, presumably Grayling, wore slick yellow overalls and held a coil of rope slung over one shoulder. He beckoned them forward without speaking. "Mr. Grayling," Gonzales said, "you reported finding some wreckage." He nodded, jaw set. "Aye. I come here to gather driftwood after storms, but I found something that looks older than any boat I've seen. Timber planks, half-rotted, pinned under rocks, lots of seaweed, and something metal." His eyes held a gleam of wary excitement. "Could be from that old legend folks talk about." Cassia and Byrne exchanged a meaningful look. "Captain Hawksmoor's ship," she murmured, heart thudding. Without further ado, they followed Grayling down a narrow, slippery path that switched back along the cliff face. Waves crashed below, spraying them with cold brine. After several careful steps, they reached a rocky shelf just above the waterline. Indeed, lodged amid seaweed and barnacles were sodden fragments of dark wood. Twisted metal braces protruded from the wood, centuries-old hardware, perhaps. Tangles of seaweed draped across them like decaying ribbons. Byrne approached cautiously, crouching low. "That definitely looks old. 18th century, maybe, but I'm no expert." Cassia, though lacking formal archaeology tools, gently inspected one plank. The wood almost disintegrated at her touch. "This is definitely historical," she whispered. "Look at those iron nails. Hand-forged, not machine-made. Could be from around the 1700s or 1800s. Officer Gonzales radioed for backup and an archaeological consultant from the county seat, but that might take hours. Meanwhile, the tide was starting to roll in. Grayling used his rope to secure some of the larger pieces to the rocks so they wouldn't wash back out to sea. As Cassia and Byrne inspected the debris, they spotted something wedged between two planks, a battered chunk of metal, heavily corroded. Carefully, Byrne pried it loose. It looked like part of a battered nameplate or plaque, almost impossible to read. But through the rust and sea growth, Cassia made out a few letters. CRESTF. She caught her breath. Crestfallen, Byrne speculated, referencing the rumoured name of Hawksmoor's vessel. Or perhaps Crestford, or something else. This could be the biggest clue yet. Officer Gonzales, scanning the horizon warily, added, "This area's known for strong currents. Debris can drift from miles away. But if it's truly from a colonial-era ship, we'll have to bring in marine archaeologists." Cassia looked toward the pounding waves. If more wreckage surfaces, it might contain artifacts or cargo. Whoever's behind these recent thefts, they might be waiting for something to wash ashore, or they might try to salvage the deeper wreck themselves. They spent another hour searching the shore. The tide soon swallowed the lower rocks, forcing them to retreat. Grayling muttered that the sea always held secrets, but it seldom gave them up willingly. The find certainly hinted that a piece of Hawksmoor's ship had broken loose from the ocean floor. If so, the old legend was more tangible than ever. Could the rest of that cargo be out there, waiting to be found? 5. The return to town. By late morning, the rain had subsided to a drizzle, but thick clouds kept the coast in gloom. Officer Gonzalez stayed behind to coordinate with county specialists, while Bayern and Cassia drove back to Westvale in the police SUV they'd borrowed. The detective's mind churned with questions. If the ship's name was truly Crestfallen, that might confirm the rumor that Hawksmoor captained her. Why was the letter C on certain stolen items? Was it referencing the ship's name rather than Cora? Or both? Cassia, meanwhile, shared the partial breakthroughs from Eliza's cryptographic analysis. She found references to runic symbols that might indicate key or entry. It feels like a puzzle. Hawksmoor's cargo might require multiple keys or pieces to unlock. Byrne nodded grimly. And someone's collecting all those pieces. The question is, do they want it for historical curiosity or something more sinister? They passed the Lighthouse Cafe, where a couple of fishermen congregated outside smoking, presumably done with their morning catches. Byrne circled around and parked in front of Finch's antiques shop, hoping Mr. Finch might have more revelations. Cassia followed him out onto the wet sidewalk, stepping around puddles. Inside, they found Finch restocking shelves. The shop was open, but quiet. When he saw them, he managed a thin smile. "Any news about the break-in suspect, Detective?" "No positive ID yet," Byrne said, "but we uncovered possible debris from Hawksmoor's ship on the southern coast. If it's authentic, it's major." Finch's eyes widened. "You don't say." He began wiping his brow, anxiety clear. "Look, if there really is a lost cargo or treasure, I want no part in it. My family's been haunted by that key and the old legends for long enough." Cassia leaned in sympathetically. "You said the chest that key belonged to was never in your possession, just the key passed down. But if the chest reappears now, or if someone already has it—" Finch's hands trembled, and he set aside the porcelain figurine he'd been holding. "I do recall something. My grandmother used to say the key was one of two. She claimed only two keys could open the old chest. I never found that second key, though. I assumed it was lost to time, or that it was nonsense." Byrne exchanged a look with Cassia. Two keys. That might mean another stolen item was the matching key. If so, the intruder at Finch's shop now possessed half the puzzle, unless they already had the other key too. Then Finch pulled out a small wooden crate from behind the counter. "Speaking of keys, I found something else in our storeroom this morning, while reorganizing. It's not a key, exactly, but it's an odd metal box with similar markings to that partial journal you took. My grandfather labeled it Hawksmoor's tokens, but I never paid it much mind." He opened the crate, revealing a tarnished iron casket about the size of a thick book. Its surface bore a faint stylized C, half obscured by rust. Finch hadn't tried opening it, presumably because it had a sturdy lock. Cassia's heart fluttered. Was this lock related to the stolen key? "May I?" Byrne asked, running a hand over the box. The metal felt cold, the surface etched with swirling designs reminiscent of older maritime motifs. Ropes, anchors, waves. The lock was small but solid. Without the proper key, it would require a skilled locksmith to force open. Cassia couldn't tear her eyes away. "This might be important, Mr. Finch." Finch nodded reluctantly. "You can take it if you think it'll help. Just, please be careful. I don't want more trouble." Byrne gently placed the casket in his satchel. "We'll safeguard it and see if we can open it. Thank you." 6. A Shrouded Figure. After departing Finch's shop, Cassia and Byrne walked toward the Lighthouse Cafe, both eager for a quick lunch and a place to talk privately. Cassia cradled the metal casket in her arms, mind racing with possibilities. The wind had picked up, stirring the fog in restless eddies across the street. As they neared the cafe, Byrne caught sight of a hooded figure ducking into an alley. Something about the furtive movement made him pause. "Hold on," he whispered to Cassia, nodding in that direction. They stepped quietly down the alley, which was littered with damp cardboard boxes and trash cans. The figure stood partway along the brick wall, partially hidden behind stacked crates. At first glance, Burns saw the shape of a slender person, their face shadowed. They seemed to be reading a slip of parchment by the alley's dim daylight. Suddenly, the figure looked up, noticing them. With a startled gasp, they fled deeper into the alley. Bayern took off in pursuit, and Cassia followed, adrenaline surging. Water splashed underfoot as they dodged trash cans. The figure vaulted over a low fence with impressive agility. Bayern scrambled up the fence, quickly scanning the next stretch of alley. The figure was already near the far end, turning a corner. Cassia, panting, tried to keep up, but by the time they reached the corner, the figure had vanished into the swirling mist. All that remained was a small scrap of parchment lying in a puddle. Cassia carefully retrieved it, hoping to salvage whatever was written there. She lifted it gingerly. The ink, partially smeared by water, showed more of those cryptic runes. Byrne cursed under his breath. Twice he'd nearly caught this hooded individual, and twice they slipped away. Breathing heavily, Cassia tucked the parchment into a plastic bag she found in her coat pocket. At least we have another piece of the puzzle. Byrne nodded, scanning the alley one last time. No footprints or distinct clues. Let's get inside and see if we can decipher anything before it's completely illegible. They emerged back onto the main street and entered the Lighthouse Cafe. The warmth of the interior enveloped them, along with the smell of frying fish and fresh bread. A couple of regulars glanced up, curious about their hurried entrance. 7. Clues at the cafe. They settled into a quiet corner booth. A friendly waitress, Helen, her name tag read, brought them menus. Byrne ordered a coffee and a fish sandwich, while Cassia, her appetite dulled by excitement, only asked for tea. Bayern laid the damp parchment on a few paper napkins. Not sure how much we can salvage. Cassia gently dabbed the corners, heart thumping. She could make out a partial symbol reminiscent of the letter C, combined with a shape that might be an anchor or a cross. Another pair of runic characters lurked at the edge of the page, half lost to the water. Eliza might be able to glean something from this, she said quietly. We'll pay her a visit after lunch, Barn agreed, eyes flicking around the cafe to see if anyone was watching them. The small group of diners seemed occupied with their meals, but that prickling sense of being observed lingered. He couldn't shake it. Cassia took the metal casket from her satchel, examining it more closely. If the stolen key from Finch's shop opens this, we're out of luck for now, but maybe there's a second key, or perhaps a locksmith can crack it without damaging what's inside. Byrne frowned thoughtfully. Before we do that, I want to see if we can decode more about its history. If it's truly a piece of the Hawksmoor puzzle, forced entry might destroy fragile contents. Their food arrived. Cassia absent-mindedly stirred sugar into her tea, while Byrne took a few quick bites of his sandwich. Each was lost in thought, considering the dangerous road ahead. If the hooded figure had recognized them, it meant the adversary was actively trailing their movements. Danger was mounting, and they didn't even know who to trust in this town beyond one another, and perhaps Finch, though he seemed more frightened than duplicitous. After finishing, they paid the bill and rose to leave. As they did, the older couple sitting by the window abruptly stood and exited too, though they left half a piece of pie untouched. Cassia and Byrne noticed, but said nothing. Outside, the couple disappeared into a side street. Coincidence, or were they trailing them? The tension in the air felt almost tangible. 8. The cryptic revelation. They returned to the library with their new scrap of parchment. Eliza Marlowe greeted them with a subdued enthusiasm. She'd uncovered some small but significant insight in their absence. Bringing them to the archives room, she laid out a typed set of notes. I've been matching runic elements with alchemical symbols, Eliza explained. I found references to an old mariner's cipher used in the 18th century by certain pirate or smuggler groups. They combined runic letters with alchemical or astrological symbols to hide coordinates, instructions, or references to hidden caches. From the partial strings we have, I believe these might be coordinates for specific locations, perhaps along the Westvale coastline. Cassia and Bayern exchanged excited looks. Coordinates for Hawksmoor's lost cargo? Cassia asked. Eliza nodded. Possibly. Or it could mark multiple points, a route or a series of hideouts. The partial lines I translated suggest something like 3 points or the third cove. Hard to be sure, but if you gather enough of these scraps, you might reconstruct a map or instructions. Bayern's mind jumped to the newly discovered wreckage. We found debris from what might be the Crestfallen, he said. Could the coordinates lead out to deeper waters where the main wreck might be? Eliza shrugged. That's plausible. You might need older charts of the region. If you find the right combination of coded references and actual navigation data, you could pinpoint a location at sea. Cassia's voice quivered with excitement. If that's the case, then the casket Finch gave us might contain a final piece of the puzzle, more runes or a partial map. That's why our thief stole the key. Eliza leaned over the small scrap of parchment Cassia and Bayern had recovered in the alley. Carefully dabbing away any residual dampness, she laid it flat under bright light. This line here, she pointed with a pencil tip, seems to match the phrase bound by 2 keys. Over here, the letters might read sunken cradle. It's incomplete, but enough to confirm a motif. Sunken cradle could be a poetic way of describing a watery grave, Bayern mused, or specifically referencing the ship's final resting place. Eliza beamed, clearly enjoying the challenge. I'll keep working on a more precise translation. But I think you're on the right track. Someone is collecting these scraps to form a coherent set of instructions. The thefts might be about reassembling a map or coded text scattered across multiple artifacts. 9. An unexpected ally. Leaving Eliza to her deciphering, Cassia and Bayern stepped back into the main library area, their minds whirling with possibilities. The rain had picked up again, drumming steadily on the roof. Just as they were about to exit, a voice called from behind a bookshelf. Cassia Morell? Cassia and Bayern turned to see a tall, bespectacled man with salt and pepper hair wearing a damp overcoat. He looked somewhere in his 50s, with a scholarly air about him. Cassia blinked. Doctor. Harland. What are you doing here? Dr. Sebastian Harland was a well-known maritime historian and archaeologist from a university 2 states away. He and Cassia had exchanged emails about a year ago regarding a rumored pirate ledger, but she'd never met him in person. I came as soon as I heard rumors of 18th century debris washing ashore near Westvale, Harland explained. I suspected you might be involved. You do love your maritime legends. He gave her a friendly smile, then nodded politely to Bayern. Byrne introduced himself as a private investigator working a case possibly tied to Hawksmoor's lost cargo. Dr. Harland's eyes lit up. Hawksmoor? Yes, I've studied that legend. The Crestfallen was rumored to carry a strange cargo from the Far East. Some said cursed objects, others said contraband. No one's ever confirmed the truth. So you came to investigate? Cassia asked, her skepticism tempered by curiosity. Harland nodded. I was in the region for a conference and heard whispers about relics going missing. I suspect someone is chasing the real location of that lost cargo. If the debris is indeed from the Crestfallen, it's a once-in-a-lifetime find. The academic world would be abuzz. Cassia turned to Bayern, who wore a wary expression. We could use an expert, she ventured. Dr. Harland's knowledge might help us confirm the authenticity of artifacts, including the casket we have. Bayern hesitated. Trust was scarce these days, and new arrivals always raised suspicion. But Cassia's eyes pleaded with him. All right, he said quietly. We can show you something. But it needs to remain confidential. Too many people already want it. Harland raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Understood. I'm here in good faith. I promise." Within minutes, they were huddled in a secluded corner of the library, away from prying eyes. Cassia carefully extracted the iron casket from her satchel. Dr. Harlan's breath caught as he turned it over in his hands. Remarkable. The style of the engraving suggests 18th century maritime artistry, a swirling wave motif, perhaps from the South Sea's influence. And this crest-like sea, it could indeed be for the crestfallen or for Captain Hawksmoor's wife, Cora. Hard to say. He set the casket down gently. I can do a more thorough analysis if we get it to a proper lab, but that might take time. Where's the key? Byron grimaced. Stolen. That's part of the bigger problem. Harlan mulled over the lock mechanism. We can open it without the key, but it'll be risky. Might destroy the contents if they're fragile. Cassia chewed her lip. Let's hold off on forcing it for now. We have an inkling there's a second key out there. Maybe the same person behind the thefts is searching for it. If we can figure out where that second key is, we could preserve whatever's inside. Harlan nodded, though his excitement was palpable. Agreed. Still, we should keep this casket safe. If the thief finds out you have it, you'll be targeted. The mention of danger made Cassia's stomach flutter, but she resolved to see this through. After a brief discussion, they agreed that Dr. Harlan would remain in Westvale for a few days, helping them identify any new artifacts. Cassia and Byron would continue the on-the-ground investigation and keep the casket hidden. 10. Distant footsteps. They stepped out of the library together into the late afternoon. The storm clouds had shifted somewhat, leaving only a gentle drizzle, but the wind still carried a biting chill. Harlan excused himself to check into a local inn and then visit the museum curator, Graham Ellison, about the stolen ship's bell. Meanwhile, Cassia and Byron turned their steps back toward Mrs. Sweeney's boarding house. A tense hush had fallen over Westvale's streets. Most folks had retreated indoors to avoid the gusting wind. Seagulls circled overhead, their cries echoing in the mist. They walked side by side, discussing their next moves in hushed tones. Neither noticed the pair of figures who emerged from a narrow alley and began following at a careful distance. The watchers kept to the shadows, letting Cassia and Byron drift further ahead, always remaining just out of sight. Eventually, Cassia paused at an intersection. You know, maybe we should move the casket to a safer place. We've been carrying it around. If the intruder is watching us, we're practically bait. Byrne nodded, eyes scanning the empty street. There's a safe in my room at Mrs. Sweeney's. Not exactly Fort Knox, but it's concealed, at least until we figure out a better option. They continued on, oblivious to their silent tale. At the boarding house, Byrne ushered Cassia upstairs. Mrs. Sweeney was nowhere to be seen, likely out shopping or visiting neighbors. Once in Byrne's room, they locked the door. The detective pulled a battered suitcase from the closet where a small combination safe was tucked inside. He popped it open and placed the iron casket inside, carefully wrapping it in cloth. Then he spun the lock. The sense of relief was palpable, though fleeting. Now, it's out of sight, Byron said, exhaling. Cassia looked around, noticing the modest furnishings, the file folders on the small desk. She saw the photo of the stolen locket pinned to an open notebook. We haven't forgotten your original reason for being here, Devon Mowbray's stolen locket, she said. That might be connected to Hawksmoor, too. Byron nodded. I suspect the same. If that locket had a crest or an inscription, it might be part of this puzzle. My client was adamant it was in Westvale. Could that be the second key, or part of it? I don't know yet. A sharp rap at the door startled them both. Byron reached for the doorknob cautiously. Outside stood Mrs. Sweeney, her face drawn with concern. I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a phone call downstairs. A man named Devon Mowbray, was it? He says it's urgent. Byron's eyes flicked to Cassia. Thank you, Mrs. Sweeney. I'll take it. 11th. An urgent warning. In the boarding house's small sitting room, Byron lifted the receiver of the old landline phone. Cassia lingered nearby, straining to hear. "Byrne speaking," he said. On the other end, Devon Mowbray's cultured voice was tense. "Ah, detective, I've tried reaching you on your cell, but you didn't answer. I have alarming news. The locket is in danger, or rather, the people who hold it. I received an anonymous note warning me to call off the investigation, or there would be dire consequences." Byrne frowned. "A threat? Did it have any strange symbols, by chance?" There was a brief rustling of paper. "Yes, actually. Strange runic shapes and an old letter C. I'm not certain what it means, but it spooked me. Detective, you must be cautious. Whatever you've uncovered in Westvale, these people are serious." Byrne's grip on the phone tightened. "Understood. Any leads on who sent the note?" "None," Mowbray replied. "And, for what it's worth, if you must stop searching for the locket to preserve your safety, I won't hold it against you. But if you choose to continue, I'll double your fee. This has gone beyond a mere theft. Something bigger is at play, something dangerous. I don't want any blood on my hands." Byrne exchanged a look with Cassia, who stood anxiously by the staircase. "I'm not giving up yet," he said into the phone. "But thanks for the warning." He hung up and relayed Mowbray's message to Cassia, who paled. "Threats, runic symbols, the letter C. They're definitely connected." Byrne pressed his lips together. "We've got to move carefully. But we can't walk away. Too many pieces are in motion." A distant crash of thunder punctuated his words. Outside, the wind howled, and the branches of a lone tree scraped the window like a skeletal hand. Cassia hugged her arms, fighting off a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. For all their discoveries, the sense of looming peril had intensified. 12. The Mysterious Messenger. Night fell early thanks to the heavy cloud cover. Cassia prepared to return to her motel, but hesitated, recalling that someone had followed them before. Byrne offered to walk her there. As they stepped outside into the windy gloom, they found a folded note pinned to the boarding house's front door with a fishing hook. The hook glinted ominously in the porch light. Byrne carefully removed the note, unpinning it from the wood. A smear of red, paint or something else, marred the paper. He held it close so they could read it by the light. "Stop your search. These relics are not yours. The sea keeps its secrets. Turn back, or the tide will wash you away." No signature, only a strange symbol at the bottom, a stylized wave crest, reminiscent of a coiled serpent devouring its own tail. Cassia felt a chill race up her spine. Yet another threat, more ominous than the last. "What now?" she whispered. Byrne's jaw set. "We don't scare easily." But inside, even he felt a tremor of unease. Whoever was sending these messages had eyes on them. The best they could do now was see this through, hoping to stay one step ahead of the unknown adversary. What lies ahead? Night had settled over Westvale, the thick fog rolling in like a living shroud. Lightning flickered on the far horizon, and thunder grumbled across the waves. Cassia and Byrne parted ways at her motel, each lost in anxious thoughts. Dr. Harland prepared his notes for an early morning inspection of the newly discovered ship debris. Officer Gonzalez would continue patrolling the streets, on alert for further break-ins. And somewhere in the darkness, a hooded figure, or perhaps more than one, planned the next move. In the next episode, the circle of intrigue widens. We'll see more confrontations, deeper dives into cryptic symbols, and a startling piece of evidence that upends everything. Allies might betray our protagonists, or new friends could emerge unexpectedly. As the waves crash ceaselessly against Westvale's shore, the mystery grows ever more tangled, and the stakes climb higher. Stay tuned for Episode 3, where the hunt for the keys, the lock, and the centuries-lost cargo intensifies, and the fog of Westvale grows darker still.